So you're welcome to take notes if you'd like to, or you can just purchase a copy of the book. And sometimes it's nice to just let yourself listen without taking notes and trust your own capacity to receive transmission when it's given. Sometimes the doing mind thinks, I need to capture this and make sure I don't forget it. And you're welcome to take notes. So, one of my favorite quotes from Rilke, I don't know how many of you here are fans of the poet Rilke. It's the quote, "Love consists of this, two solitudes that meet, protect, and greet one another." Two solitudes that meet, protect, and greet one another. And I think I love this poem because it points to, for me, how in practice we're given the opportunity to find our solitude, to find our refuge, to find this place of peace, to get to know our essence more fully, to find this place where we actually have freedom from being guided and led by the conditioned mind, the mind of separation, and to take root in our solitude. From there, many people get confused. Meditators come off retreat and say, well, I found my solitude, but now I'm going back into the real world, into everyday life. This is where the real problem is. I can't maintain that kind of presence, that quality of attuned peace when I'm with my family, or when I'm dealing with a conflict at work, when I'm on a date, maybe for the first time, when I'm reading the news and dealing with really difficult world news. And so to think of the invitation of finding our solitude, as you were speaking to earlier, getting to let your stillness and quietude become more your guide in how you express, how you communicate, and certainly, as we've been practicing here today, how we listen. The myth of separation is incredibly pervasive in our society, and we've already talked about it today. I don't have to say too much, but this incessant chatter, inside and out, the media, the news, the conditioning we receive from family, from society, culture, that causes disconnect when we give it our attention within, causes disconnect with one another. If I'm listening to Liza, but I'm really giving attention to the mind of separation. And it certainly causes disconnect with our relationship with the world at large, with nature. And so these principles for relational mindfulness are really there to support us to dissolve the myth of separation, to use all of our interactions with more intention and more passion, I would say, for waking up from that trance and for helping one another to wake up. And oftentimes when people start making that shift where they realize, oh, real practice actually begins after the retreat ends, and then I go back into my ordinary life and I see what's required of me, and I inquire and I respond to meet what's arising in my real life with full presence, okay? When you start making that shift more and more, and many of you have experienced this, there's not anyone around you, there's not anyone in your field who won't respond with gratitude, who doesn't actually feel grateful of you being one more person who's willing to model vulnerability and transparency and keeping it real in a world of so much facade, yeah? I'd like just for a minute, because we're doing this teaching in the city of Los Angeles, and we've already noted that there are some extra influences here from things like Hollywood and such. Let's just name for a minute some of the facades, some of the masks that we tend to put on and see others around us put on, but let's start within, to guard ourselves from vulnerability, to avoid keeping it real. Can we just call out some of those masks? Okay, so perhaps, as we've talked about already, the mask of I want to look like the smart one, or in spiritual circles, the wise one, right? Perhaps the mask of effort, or rather expert, yeah? Perhaps the mask of just keeping it pretty, just happy, really. There's kind of a, I think, spiritual bypassing thing that goes on that I've seen right here in Santa Monica. I look really good and I'm really pretty and I'm really happy. Anyone know that? Okay, let's name some other masks. Can you call them out?
Status.
Status, yeah, I'm someone. I'm someone.
The car you drive.
Look at the car I drive. I'm someone. What else?
Professional title.
Professional title. People love hiding behind professional titles. And even now in the mindfulness world, there's this whole thing of I'm just going to practice for a few months and then get a certificate to be a facilitator so I can have a special title. Yeah, okay. Who else? Call them out.
Youth.
Say that again.
Youth.
Youth. I'm going to use my youth, which is absolutely fleeting, temporary, as a kind of mask to hide out under. Yeah? Thank you for naming that.
Levels of education.
Levels of education. Yeah, I'm educated. I'm intelligent. Yeah.
Decisiveness and determination.
Decisiveness and determination as a mask, kind of a false front of I'm really, really strong. I'm determined. Yeah? Okay.
Toughness and
Tough.
effective.
It's all over this city. I'm tough. And how about I'm cool? Right?
Well, that goes with aggressive and competitive.
Aggressive, competitive. Couple more? Yeah.
Anger. Or angry.
Yes, anger is certainly a mask. Typically with something more vulnerable underneath. Yeah. And so let's move on briefly to just naming what are some of the parts of us who are underneath those masks that we're trying to not be seen by others, that we tend to hide in our conditionally loving mentality rather than let be seen. Let's name some of those.
Scared.
The scared one.
Not
Yeah.
good enough.
Part of us who feels not good enough.
Hot mess.
I'm a hot mess. Gotta hide that. I'm sure no one else is ever.
Insecure.
I'm insecure and I don't want that to be seen.
Abandonment.
I feel abandoned and alone and I don't want that to be seen. Yeah.
Vulnerable.
Vulnerability. All forms of vulnerability that we try to mask and protect. Instead of remembering that perhaps our greatest strength is our vulnerability, our sensitivity, perhaps that is our greatest strength and our shared strength. And so how many of you, even today in this retreat, have experienced when you're willing to speak from vulnerability and when you hear others really speak from vulnerability, willing to be transparent, even in a moment of extreme fragility, okay, sensitivity, how that strengthens you and those around you. Raise your hand. Yeah, thank you. Anything else you want to name about what gets hidden before we move on?
Tiredness.
Tiredness, thank you. So we're looking at what are some of the conditions our society has created that we've talked about, the dividing line that each and every one of us has integrated inside ourselves. These parts of me are okay, are acceptable, are lovable. These parts of me are not. Certainly the energetic one, like the extrovert, right, and the happy one, and the pretty one, and we could go on and on, are acceptable. Tired, not so much in our culture, right? Not so much. And in fact, we've invented a whole slew of energy drinks and power bars and special pills to pop in case you get tired. Right? Yeah. So I'm going to move into talking a bit about how the principles for relational mindfulness can support us to remember who we actually are underneath that kind of distortion, underneath all of that conditioning. How when we take on these practices and principles and do our own inquiry with more courage, we are positioning ourselves to heal personal and collective conditioning. We're doing a great service to all, helping ourselves see clearly and get free from that kind of distortion. Okay?